Hello, comic creators. Welcome back to the Business of Comics podcast. This is going to be the pre Thanksgiving show. We're going to go through the show in the same manner that we always do. I'm going to start off with the news, get into a little bit of commentary, and then we're going to answer your questions. Keep in mind as we go through all of the questions and all of the commentary that this is not legal advice because simply looking at this podcast does not make me your attorney. So, the first major story of the past couple of weeks is a continuation in the movement that has been happening throughout the second and third quarter of 2025 in the realm of digital comics. A new platform called Inky Pen has decided that they're going to launch their service on Steam. Now, for all of you who are unaware what Steam is, it is a internet-based video game distribution platform primarily geared towards PC gaming, although they now have their own consoles and things like that. But that's not the important part of the story. The important part of the story is Inky Pen has decided to take advantage of the Venn diagram between comic book readers and video game players, of which that Venn diagram is substantial, in an effort to have a successful launch. At the same time, Sweet Shop, which is another digital comic books platform, is going into their beta phase, launching with titles from Image, Kodansha, IDW, and a few dozen other major publishers. Now, this is on the heels of Bang launching a new digital comics platform about a month ago, and expansions of major publishers on Webtoons, Global Comics, and Crunchyroll. Now, with all of these different movements and the different amounts of comics that are available digitally, Rob Salkowitz, which is a very influential writer in the realm of the comic book business, suggests that there's going to be more consumer choice, and this is going to overall be better for the consumer. But as a publisher, it's going to raise significant questions that you're going to have to answer in terms of your marketing and your distribution. If all of your comics are on five or six different platforms, then how exactly are you going to drive traffic to those platforms so people can actually buy your comics? Are you going to drive all the traffic to one platform to maximize your sales? Or are you going to divide it equally among several platforms at once and just see what happens? Are you going to put certain books on one platform and some on another because of the fit of where what the platforms are actually promoting? Or are you just going to hope for discoverability and that someone will just stumble onto your comic and somehow that will make it go viral and then you'll make a lot of money? Just a hint, just a spoiler, that last option is not an option. You cannot wait for people to find your comics, especially in the digital space, because there are so many other comics out there. You're going to have to drive traffic to your comic if you want people to see it, which again raises the question, how are you going to navigate all of these different options in terms of your digital comic distribution? The second major story was that we had a couple of reports from publicly traded companies in the comic book space to kind of give us an idea of how things are looking going into the end of the year. Now, Webtoons posted an $11 million loss over the last quarter, in spite of the fact that they have more users and they have more paying users. The company still posted a significant financial loss for the quarter. At the same time, Embracer Group, which is the company that owns Dark Horse Comics, has also posted a $2.5 million loss. And this suggests that digital comics are still struggling to make a profit. Even with all the movement in digital comics and everybody jumping into the space to try to capitalize on what is a substantial market, it is still difficult to generate a profit online. Historical numbers suggest that digital comics make about 20% of the amount that print comics makes in the same time period. So it's going to be interesting to see how many companies that all of this digital movement that we've seen over the past 4 or 5 months, how many of these companies are going to be able to sustain themselves over the next year, 18 months, 2 years in the struggle to reach profitability. And if you are a comic book publisher, it makes a lot of sense to understand how you are going to make money on each one of these platforms. That's going to be one of the major determining factors of which platform you go with, because every platform has a different pricing structure, a different payout structure. Some of them use ads, some of them use subscriptions, some of them you buy individual issues the same way you would in a comic shop, and a portion of that money is going to go to you and a portion is going to go to the platform. Once you figure out which platform actually makes the most financial sense and which platform actually gives you the ability to retain ownership and control over your comics, that's going to be the platform that's going to make the most sense to go with, rather than going with a platform that's A, not going to survive for very long, or B, is somehow going to attempt to tie up the rights that you have in your comic book publishing. Moving on to the commentary for the week. This is going to be the last live show of the year because we're heading into Thanksgiving, going into the holidays. I'm going on vacation. So I'm going to do the end of the year kind of wrap up now. But instead of doing what I usually do, which is predict what's going to happen in the coming year, because I've been wrong so badly for so many years, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to actually talk about the two things that I am absolutely sure that every comic book creator is going to need for their comics in 2026. And those two things are marketing and distribution. Now, marketing and distribution are the probably the least attractive aspects of making comics for artists and creative people who basically want to tell their story. But if you do not market your comic, then by definition, there is no one to read your story. Marketing is building the relationship with the people who are most likely to buy your comic before your comic comes out. That way, when it comes out, you have someone's willing to actually read the story you worked so hard on. If you're an independent publisher and you don't have a market for your book, it is extremely difficult to sustain a publishing business. If you're working in a creator owned space and you think, okay, I'm going to go with a publisher and the publisher is going to market the book so I don't have to worry about it, you will probably be wrong. Because what a publishing company does, in most cases, they will do marketing for their entire catalog. Your book will be one book among many books, which means you, unless you are a substantial name, they're not going to put extra marketing dollars into you. They're going to expect you to market the book that you brought to them to increase sales. So marketing is still going to be your job. Even if you're a freelance comic book creator, I've seen many contracts where marketing and promotion of the book that you're working on online is a one of the things that you have to do as a function of being this comic book creator. So if you know you have to do the marketing for your book, the question is, okay, what does marketing actually look like? It starts with, well, it has to start before you start making your comic. It starts with what's called a marketing analysis, where you figure out what your story is and who your story appeals to. Then you have to figure out who the competition is for your book. You have to understand where your potential readers are, what they like to talk about, and how you can find and connect with them. And then you have to put in, through your marketing plan, you have to put in the time and the effort to build that connection with those people while your book is being created. It doesn't do you any good to try to start marketing the book after you've made the book or after you've released the book, because then it's too late. It's the same reason why trailers for movies don't come out after the movie comes out. They come out before the movie comes out to generate that interest to get people to want to go to the movie. Now, Distribution is something that you're going to have to wrestle with in 2026, primarily because the landscape of distribution in comics has changed. The Diamond bankruptcy that we've all been mired in for the past almost a year now has altered the landscape of comic book distribution. You have to figure out all of the available options that you have for your book and pick the combination that's going to maximize the exposure of your comic. Now, the answer to where you should distribute your book is going to be in your marketing. Because once you understand who it is that's probably going to read the book and you understand where it is they buy books, the answer is simply put your book where they're going to go, and then they're more likely to buy it. It's much more difficult to get a group of people to go somewhere they don't usually go, to do something they don't usually do, to buy your comic. What you want to do is remove as much friction as possible, make things as easy as possible for them to do it, which is why you're going to tailor your distribution to the marketing that you have already done. That means your book could be distributed through crowdfunding or comic shops or conventions or libraries or bookstores or digital or direct to consumer or something else that we haven't even heard of yet. As long as you figure out a easy way for you to get your readers your comic, you'll be in a good spot. Otherwise, there's no reason to have a good book and people excited to read the book and no way to actually bridge that gap and deliver the book to them. So I am going to now move on to the questions that comic creators have sent to me. If you'd like to send me a question when we actually ramp up the show again in January, you can be able to reach out on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, or you could go directly to my website, GamalHennessy.com. You could reach out to me there and ask a question. We've got 3 questions, so I will actually attempt to get through all of them right now. Question number 1. When working with a property in a public domain, how can I introduce my own original characters and story elements while still retaining full copyright over those new characters and the story that I'm telling? The best way to protect an original work, any original comic, is to register the copyright. If you actually are on my mailing list in the next couple days, I'm going to be sending out links to a video that I put together that will actually walk you step by step how to actually register the copyright for a comic. If you want to, if you're not part of the mailing list and you'd like to actually register for it, I just put it in the chat and I put it on the screen so you could take a look at it. But that's not the important part of the answer. The answer is actually in the process of registering a copyright, there is a portion that's called a limitation of claim. This is where you actually identify for the Library of Congress what elements of your book are in the public domain or are licensed to somebody else or belong to somebody else. If you do that, then the Copyright Office will know that a portion of your comic is in the public domain, but everything else in the comic, the characters, the story, the setting, everything else is going to be yours. So when you have a comic, copyright the comic. If you're using elements from someone else's work, identify those in the copyright registration, knowing that everything else is going to belong to you. Next question. From your perspective as an attorney and consultant in comics, what is one repeated misstep you see new comic creators make that really gets under your skin, and how do we avoid it? The biggest misstep that I see comic creators do, and it is an understandable problem, is that they get excited and inspired to make a comic. And then they make the comic, and only after that do they actually look at and consider the business and legal realities of the book that they are making. So they meet an artist. If you're a writer, you meet an artist, you get really excited, you start making a comic. The comic is made, you go and launch the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is successful. And then you come to me because you want to actually define the relationship between you and the artist, or you and the letterer, or the distributor, or anybody else. It is actually a much better scenario for you, not for me, for you, to actually get all of that squared away before you make the comic. The the best case scenario in putting together a comic involves figuring out what story you want to tell and why, then figuring out how you're going to pay for it, then creating a structure to protect the money and the idea that you are now going to be working with. Then go out and find whoever's going to work on the comic. Then figure out who's going to read the comic. Then figure out how the comic's going to get delivered from you to the reader, and then make the comic. Because if you do it that way, you actually understand what your marketing is, so who you're actually talking to, which is going to inform how the comic is made. You're going to know how the book is going to be distributed, so you're not going to make a 200-page graphic novel if you've decided that this book really needs to be on Webtoon. If you do it the other way, where you make the book first and then you try to structure the business around the book, you're basically working backwards. You have already basically tried to take off and you don't have a plane yet. So what I recommend most times, make the business structure first, add the comic book to that, instead of making a comic and then trying to build a business around it. The third question: what genre or subgenre do you think deserves more time in the spotlight in the comic book industry right now, and why? Are there particular types of stories you wish more creators would explore? The only advice I ever give to comic creators about genre and story and anything like that is, you have to make the story that you love. You have to make the story that you are willing to stick with for months or years or maybe the rest of your career. So it doesn't make sense trying to go and look at trends and figure out what's hot right now and then make a book to fit that trend. When I say it might be the character or the story that you're working with for the rest of your life, look at a Todd McFarlane or a Stan Sakai. If Todd McFarlane hated Spawn or Stan Sakai hated Usagi Yojimbo, would it really make sense for them to actually make comics for 5, 10, 20, 25 years? Or should they be making a comic that they actually, of characters and stories they actually love? If you're going to spend more time with this comic than you do with your friends, maybe with your family, maybe with your job, and you're going to spend money that you may not get back on a story, it doesn't make sense to work on a story that you don't even like because you think there's some trend that you're going to tap into. Especially if you look at the time cycle to make a comic and the time cycle of most trends. You could decide, well, zombies are in because they've been in for a while. You don't really like zombies, you don't really like horror comics, but you think, oh, I have to make a zombie comic. Chances are, by the time you get everything together and you publish a zombie comic, the zombie comic wave might have passed by. And now there's something else out there that you can't tap into because you spent all of your time making a zombie comic. So every story has an audience. The story that you love, there are people that want to read that story. And like I said at the top of the show, if you find those people, then you don't have to worry about what the rest of the industry or the rest of the market is doing, because those people will support you and your comic. So my advice here: make the comic that you want to make and then find the audience, instead of trying to retrofit a comic into an audience that you think already exists. regardless of the fact that you do or do not like that story. So that's going to wrap things up for this episode of the Business of Comics podcast. If you want to ask any questions, like I said, reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You type in Gamal Hennessy, you'll find it. Or if you reach out to me on GamalHennessy.com, you could also answer your questions that way. If you would like to have a consultation to discuss the plans that you have for your comics in 2026, I offer free consultations on the business and legal aspects of what you're doing. Just reach out to me on GamalHennessy.com and we can set you up for a consultation because I will be setting up appointments even though I'm going on vacation. So the next episode is going to be in the first week of January. Until then, everybody enjoy yourselves, get off the internet, and go make some comics.